From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. There are two primary reasons that I advocate for social anarchism and identify as a social anarchist. And of course, by that I mean a very simple definition: pro-democracy at all levels of society, the abolition of so-called leaders. Power has to be distributed laterally, and to the greatest extent possible, the abolition of money, or at the very least, a massive reduction in its power over us. So that's a simple working definition of what I mean by social anarchism. It's not pie in the sky, it's not utopian, it's practical, it's historical. And just because it conflicts with our current system is no reason to dismiss it. Systems change, systems come and go. That's just a fact of history. So that's our working definition for the moment. Now, the two reasons I advocate for social anarchism. So-called leaders, especially in politics, are by definition mad and incompetent. When you look at the way we're organized today, when there's so much power held by so few people, it's not only immoral, in my view, it's not only undemocratic, it's completely and utterly impractical. No single person, whether they be a school principal or a city council member or a mayor or a governor, a member of Congress, and all the way up to the ultimate example here, the president. Take any example you want. Name any one single person in any of these jobs. I would contend they are by definition incompetent, because the sheer volume of their responsibilities, the level of knowledge, of expertise in any number of areas, no single person can master or even rise to any level of the required competence. This happens in politics, very obviously. It happens in the private sector, up through the chain of command, up through management levels. As people fail upwards, they employ the Peter principle to stumble and fail into their next promotion. Leaders in nonprofit organizations, certainly leaders in politics, people who have authority, people who have titles, are by definition incompetent. There's no way they could be otherwise. Now add to that, study after study after study teaches us that with added power, with added money, with increasing status in the elite, these people become mad. They lose empathy. They're corrupted by the very nature of their position. Where's the lie? Tell me I'm wrong. Do a quick little amateur search on this. Go to Google University and ask the question, what does increased power do to a person's psyche? The more money you have, the more power you have, the less qualified you are to hold your position. So the very concept of leadership under our current system is fatally flawed. That's why I'm a social anarchist. I said there were two primary reasons. The second is, it's virtually impossible, and it's comically ridiculous to believe that money can be regulated. And I'm using the term money here in the broadest sense. I'm talking about systems with money at the center. The profit system of business, contributions in government, fundraising in the nonprofit world, even decision-making at the family level, something as fundamental as, do we want children, dictated by the power of money. And the capital L liberal will say that it can be controlled, it can be regulated, we can pass laws. This is another fundamental tenet of social anarchism. It's libertarian in this sense. The fewer laws, the better. I don't want to regulate money. I want to destroy it. Now, I understand we can't flip a switch. I understand that. But every decision we make together, that is every collective decision, and that means government. I don't want to abolish government entirely, although in its current form, it gets pretty damn close to abolition. No, the kind of social anarchism I'm talking about is still very much organized. We make collective decisions collectively. There's nothing wrong with that. As I said, democracy is at the very heart of what I'm talking about. But as this all concerns money, the right wing wants to set money free, which, to my mind, is insane. That just creates a world, which we're already seeing, that accumulates power in the hands of a very few. We often talk about 1% of the population. Hell, it's 0.01%. And in some cases, it's a handful. You could literally count 6 billionaires, mostly on one hand, who control the power and wealth equal to 3/4 of the world's population. So the right-wing idea of letting money flow freely, unencumbered, is entirely immoral and impractical. But this vapid, centrist, capital L liberal idea that we can regulate our way to fairness, to equity, is just laughable. To try to control the flow of money would be like attempting to control the flow of water. Water finds its level. You can't prevent that. But capital L liberals just want to keep building dikes and dams and estuaries and canals and think they can manipulate this flow. History has proven them wrong. Simple logic proves them insane. This is why I'm a social anarchist. Now, to get back to point number 1 just for a second, my disdain for so-called leaders. Don't mistake leaders for experts. I have a lot of respect for experts in their field. Gets back to my first point. No single person, so-called leader, has the bandwidth, the capacity, the ability to embody the knowledge, the experience, the expertise required for the role they've been given. But there are among us, and this is the good news, beautiful, capable people in every discipline. There are doctors and lawyers and plumbers and artists and historians, engineers, researchers, climate scientists, tap dancers. Name any field, any endeavor. And there are people who deserve our respect, our admiration. And though I despise the term leader and I refuse to use it, if and when we need people to share their expertise, to guide us in certain areas, to steer the boat of a particular project, to help groups get the work done like a conductor stands in front of an orchestra. There are many, many positive ways you can think of this role. So if we can manage, through social anarchism, to reduce or eliminate the concentration of money and power, all of us will be free to find our own level. And those who deserve to be in those positions of respect and authority can take those positions as needed, not as a tool for domination, but as an opportunity to serve. When we look at it that way, it's immeasurably more fair, moral, and in the end, practical, efficient, effective. So that's my brief summary introduction, advocating for social anarchism. I want to go back to the idea of experts versus leaders and why our current system is so inadequate to deal with problems. And social anarchism, with real democracy, with power distributed laterally, would be exponentially better. Because in our current system, we have so-called leaders who have to make all these laws, and it's a game of whack-a-mole. Every time some new problem comes up, we have to write a whole new body of law. And then you have to have hearings in Congress and call in a panel of experts to testify about the issue. It's a very, very inefficient system. And then these elite, rarefied members of Congress, with all the power with which they've been anointed, have to make a decision. We've already seen the ludicrous example of them trying to understand the details of high technology. You know, you get the social media oligarchs in front of them, and they're trying to figure out how all this works, the algorithms. It's a bad, bad system. When power is distributed laterally and not hierarchically, the people who really know what they're talking about can naturally rise in the conversation, and we're all better off. So that's the leadership problem we have now that needs to be fixed. Now, the money side of my argument, under social anarchism, the power of money is, if not abolished entirely, at least drastically, massively reduced. Then many of these problems don't even happen in the first place. The very idea of a prediction market, where you can make money for doing nothing except gambling, or, in this case, oftentimes, insider trading, it wouldn't even be an issue, because the power of money has been taken away. This sort of issue, this sort of problem, is nipped in the bud, to use an old expression. It doesn't need talking heads commenting on podcasts. It doesn't need members of Congress scratching their heads trying to figure out what the hell to do. It doesn't require us to consider all the competing interests, all the competing moneyed interests. Because in a system where collective decisions are made organically on a local level, based on best information we can get from actual experts in their field, there would be a more, how should I put this, a calm, consistent maintenance of well-being, instead of this frenetic, chaotic series of brush fires we have to put out all the time. And the prediction markets, I use an example because it's something that I really know very little about. But it's obviously a problem that needs to be dealt with. We need to enact some sort of regulation, some sort of laws. We can't just let this thing go. Something's got to be done. And our system is just so ill-equipped. Here's another example in an entirely different field. The rate of colorectal cancer is rising exponentially in younger adults. A couple of celebrities died from it recently, and so it kind of hit the news. And I bring this up again because I'm not an expert. And yet, I live in a society where we need to make collective decisions about issues of which I know nothing about. Which is exactly why social anarchism is far superior to whatever you want to call what we're doing now. How much power do researchers in colorectal cancer have on society at large? Can they walk into a room and make things happen? Can they pass laws? Are we expecting these nerdy researchers in their white lab coats to come into Congress and lay down the law and tell them what they need to do? Of course not. That's ridiculous. But way too many people are dying of colorectal cancer at rates much, much higher than only just a few years ago. And if we lived in an actual democracy where power was distributed laterally and decisions were made collectively, the minute these numbers started going up and researchers got concerned and started looking into it and found that our gut health is deteriorating, the researchers would have a better chance at communicating with us about our microbiome. And I'm sure my language here is very awkward because, again, I know very little about this. That's the whole point. What little I do know is that there are trillions of microbes in our bodies. We're kind of the vehicle for all these microorganisms. And that has to be a healthy ecosystem for us to be healthy. And it has everything to do with our diet and our environment and the microplastics and the chemicals in the fibers of our carpeting. And again, I'm not the expert. And neither are these yokels sitting on congressional committees who have to sort through all this information, guide it through the complicated maze, the mechanism of legislation, and all the while making sure it doesn't disrupt the hundreds and thousands of individuals and companies along the way who are profiting from one part of the problem or the other. Well, who makes the chemicals and who makes the carpeting? And big ag and big food and big pharma and the local corner grocery store. We can't interrupt anybody's profits, so we have to keep all that in mind. No. Under social anarchism, where power is lateral, where money is defanged, the rise of colorectal cancer would be a story that everyone knew about, that everyone would be concerned about, and we would do something about. Or, alternatively, and much, much better, it never would have happened in the first place. Because the people growing our food, the people weaving our carpets, the people developing pharmaceuticals, would all have been operating in democratic systems outside of the profit motive. And the minute any of these problems began to arise, they would, again, nip it in the bud. Why wouldn't they? Why would you see a serious health problem, knowing that you're part of the problem and thus part of the solution, and not do anything about it? Well, of course you would. Unless that's overridden by self-interest defined by profit. I don't have to be an expert in colorectal cancer to know this. And those are just a couple of examples. I could name 100 more. My God, foreign policy, war, invasions of nations. You want to look me in the eye and tell me that if the people of a nation actually controlled their fate with actual democracy, that they would go to war with a neighboring country? Do you suppose the corruption that goes on within government would be tolerated for a second? No. If we lived in anything close to an actual democracy, blatant corruption would be snuffed out the minute it was exposed. And, as in the earlier examples, the likelihood of that corruption would be almost nil. When money and profit are sidelined, you take away 99% of the motivation. All that's left are sex scandals. They'll always be with us. Immigration policy that's been so contentious over the last several years. The so-called Epstein files and everything that goes along with it. The spying, the extortion, the financial hundreds of millions of dollars being passed around and laundered on a global scale. In a real democracy, one that abolishes or de-emphasizes the power of money, that problem is dealt with immediately. And like the others, it likely doesn't even exist in the first place. We could trust the information we share with each other through the news media, through social media, because the for-profit algorithms would be gone. The systems themselves would be democratized. There'd be no multi-billion-dollar oligarchs manipulating us at every turn, not to mention their favorite new high-tech surveillance toys. If you still believe that a money-centric, private property, for-profit system can deal with any of these issues, please explain that to me. Please tell me how that happens. Social anarchism, at least in the very simple way I've described it, is the only solution. I've said many times, it bears repeating, I don't have a blueprint as to exactly what this system looks like. Nobody does. Anybody who claims to have designed such a system is mad and entirely antithetical to what I'm talking about, because no single person has the ability to dictate to everyone. That's the whole point. I'm advocating for a system that allows all voices to rise as needed. A system where so-called leaders and the power of money is abolished. I'm talking about basic tenets here, not a detailed blueprint. I don't know how long this will take. The sooner the better? Sure. Sure, I'd like this to happen tomorrow. Of course I would. But at the very least, we have to be moving in the right direction. I want to spend just a couple of minutes here with some ideas on what to do moving forward, how to move in the right direction. There are two ways you can look at this: what to do in your personal life and what to advocate for in politics. In our personal lives, well, I've discussed this at length in several episodes. First, do no harm. Get out of that bad job if it's doing more for profit than it is for people. Not tomorrow morning, I know, but make your plan and get out. Get into a good job that serves people over profits. Consume consciously. Engage in activism to the best of your ability. As I said, we've talked a lot about these things. I'm going to spend the next few minutes doing a quick overview on politics, what we should be advocating for, what we should be voting for, if you agree with me as I've defined our two goals. One, a lateral versus vertical distribution of power, that is, increased democracy. And two, to reduce or eliminate the power of money and profits over the interests of the people. Now, what I'm proposing is not that blueprint we talked about, the one that doesn't exist. These are just some suggestions for what we can do right now to get us going in the right direction. I have 5 points: election reform, government reform, tax reform, and then an updated Bill of Rights and nationalizing segments of the economy. That is, power to the people. And we're just going to be quick about this because we talked about some of these on past episodes. We'll talk about more of them on future episodes. Right now, just a brief overview. All right, election reform. Abolish the Electoral College, restore the Voting Rights Act, go to 100% public funding on elections. We got to legislate Citizens United right out of existence because money is not speech, corporations are not people. We got to go to ranked choice voting and proportional representation. Those things alone get us halfway there. We have to make it easier to vote, not harder, because as you know, voter fraud is a lie. Automatic registration, national holiday. We have to reverse voter suppression laws, restrictive voter ID, early voting, drop boxes, mail-in voting. We have to re-legalize registration drives, things like souls to the polls, okay? Tons of ideas. Next, government reform. We got to double the size of the House of Representatives. Right now, there's approximately 800,000 constituents per representative. That's crazy. We haven't kept up with the times, kept up with population. We have to reduce that to 400,000, which means doubling the number of representatives in the House. We should also double the size of the judiciary. All the circuit courts, we need to double the number of circuit courts, double the number of justices on the Supreme Court. Now, the Senate is the toughest nut to crack. I don't know what to do about the Senate. It's the most undemocratic component of the federal government. There are 40 million Californians, while the bottom states by population, Alaska, Vermont, Wyoming, and the 2 Dakotas, have less than 1 million each. And yet, each of these states gets 2 senators. It makes no sense. The Senate is completely undemocratic. We could make it more democratic by adding states. D.C. should be a state. Puerto Rico, if they want it. Combine the Dakotas into 1 state. Split California into 3. I don't know. These are all tough to do. We could kill the filibuster. That would help. Like I said, I'm really not sure about the Senate. Help me out on this one. But here's what I do know. Legislative and judicial branches have to reassert their power regarding oversight, checks and balance over the executive. Any 1 or 2 of the government reforms I've suggested will get us in the right direction, because we have to reduce the power of the Oval Office. And, of course, term limits across the board. Term limits for everybody. House, Senate, judiciary. Okay, tax reform. Now, a quick note here. I've said many times I favor the abolition of money entirely. I've also said that it can't be regulated. But I also know I can't pull that magic switch. So here are some ideas we can do immediately, right now, that at least take us in the right direction to reduce the power of money over our lives. Tax billionaires out of existence. Nobody needs to be a billionaire. Nobody made $1 billion by themselves. It took people, it took infrastructure. So that money should go back to the people and back into the infrastructure. Next, institute a negative income tax. First introduced by Richard Nixon, for God's sakes. Also known as a universal basic income. However you do it, I don't know the exact details of how you do it, but we have to have a UBI. Especially with the coming dominance of AI and robotics, I mean, there's really no choice at this point. Experts and commentators right, left, and center all agree on that. Next, we need a new Bill of Rights. You may know from your history that in 1944, FDR proposed the Economic Bill of Rights that guaranteed a job, fair pay and working conditions, identified monopolies as unacceptable, recognized education as a right, recognized food, clothing, recreation, and housing as rights, and of course, healthcare and retirement. I would add to this a digital Bill of Rights. Each one of us has an individual right of access to all things digital, period. That has to be recognized and enforced. I mean, the internet is almost sounding quaint as a term these days. It sounds so old-fashioned. So just think all things digital. You have the right to step out of your house and into the physical world, right? I mean, of course you do. You should have that exact same right to step into the digital world. It's become that important. We have to absolutely own all of our own data. We must have absolute right to privacy. Now, when you walk out of your house into the world, you give up some privacy. Okay, that's expected. But people can't just come pick your pocket. The physical world and the digital world have to be recognized equally when it comes to your individual rights. So we just have to nationalize the internet, including and especially the development and the implementation of AI. Now, if you hate the word nationalize, if that scares you, I know, there's another term, sounds kind of archaic. It sounds classic Bolshevik lefty, I know. So please put that word out of your mind and replace it with in the hands of the people, basic small d democracy. Or even better, think of it as for the benefit of all people, not for the profits of a few. Everybody agrees with that. So there are 1,000 more ideas we could talk about. This is just a bare bones start. Election reform, government reform, tax reform, then the long overdue updated Bill of Rights, which now includes a digital Bill of Rights, where we democratize the digital world. See, I don't think any of these ideas are necessarily left or right politically. Most people agree with the slogan, people over profits, but they get scared about the implementation. I really think all the ideas I've mentioned have wide appeal, from traditional lefties, even center-left, to libertarians, even those who self-identify as conservatives. I mean, especially when you offer these ideas without the attached labels and jargon, which is something I'm still kind of working on. Maybe you can help me with that. Now, you know who hates the ideas that I've just mentioned? Centrists, moderates, defenders of the status quo. You know who really, especially hates these ideas? Republican and Democratic politicians. Because they share power, and they would rather hold on to half the power in an undemocratic system than hold only a fraction of that power in a true democracy. And the ideas I've outlined, the goals I've outlined, you know who it works for? It works for everybody. So, some ideas that we can start immediately to increase democracy and to reduce the power of money and profit over our lives. All right, thanks for listening. Find this and all episodes at the website, charlespurcell.com, or on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. Find us on Blue Sky and Substack. Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. I love you. See you out there.